So today I wanted to talk about the idea of managing one's emotions and fake it till you make it. So I recently received some feedback from someone that my expression of emotion had kind of disturbed them in some way or had impacted them in a negative way. And it brought me back to some advice I received about 11 years ago that at first I really strongly rejected. And as I came to know about Buddhism and then started to practice more and more, I keep coming back to it. I was like, oh, that's got a lot of wisdom in it. So to give some framework around the initial advice that I received, about 11 years ago, I just basically fled Sydney and went to Nepal for a 3-month community service program. I had kind of gotten sick of the scene that I was in Sydney. Came from a very protected and academic high school where I was kind of basically drug-free and very calm and focused. And as soon as, on my 18th birthday, my mom, we went out for a family lunch, and we went to this steakhouse for some reason. And basically, my mom was arranging me an interview for a job. Because during my whole high school, my parents had been quite strict about not working because I had to focus on my studies. But, graduating, then go. And going into this kind of little micro-universe that was full of drugs and partying and alcohol and kind of loose behavior, after a few years of being there and kind of observing that and slightly getting involved in that, and also going to university and trying to find my feet there, I'd had enough. And I wanted a kind of a change of scene and to kind of really break out of this kind of spiral I could see that I could head into if I kind of stayed where I was. And so I found an NGO online that did these 3-month offering service programs, and I decided to go to Nepal. And with that NGO, we basically did some construction work. So in one village I stayed at, we were finishing the construction of a big hall where the youth would then be taught trade. So they could have skills. And in the second village we stayed at, we finished building the top floor of what was a milk testing center on the bottom, and then the top floor was going to be a medical center. So quite meaningful work. So with the program, there was, I think, 10 or 12 of us. I think a few people left at the beginning because I think they had an idea of what Nepal and the program would be like, and they're like, I can't do this, and then they left. But there was a team lead and a team assistant. And I unfortunately clashed a lot with the team lead. On the first day when we kind of all met there, the first outing that she organized was to go to a bar and to drink, dance, and get merry. And I was just like, oh, I've flown halfway around the world to get away from this, and this is like right back into how we're all going to bond on that first night, which is, I mean, the drinking culture in Australia is quite strong, so not surprising, but not what I wanted. And she was a very nice person, but very kind of really energetic aerobics instructor, high energy, bubbly, which kind of really clashed with my, at that time, slightly punk, emo wannabe, all dressed in black, very serious. I wasn't really going to be having a part of her energy. I'm like, yeah. And so the 3 months were very meaningful and very helpful, and I grew a lot. And at the end, we had a 3-month, an interview before we went back home, kind of like, what have you learned? How have you come? That kind of thing. And she offered me this advice that she'd seen that when I was unhappy with something or just grumpy in general, I would wear it on my sleeves. I would let everyone know. And it wasn't necessarily acting out in some way or even verbally. It was just, you can walk into a room and if someone's angry, you can feel the vibration often. And so she encouraged me to experiment with the idea of fake it till you make it. And I can't remember the rest of the conversation because I think at that moment I just shut down because I rejected it so strongly, with the idea that if I'm upset, I have a right to feel that emotion. Very much thinking like there's a reason why I feel like this, And if I don't allow myself to feel it, then I'm stuffing it. Yeah, so I couldn't hear her at that time. And then about a year and a half later or a year later, I met Buddhism and I started to learn about working with the mind. And more I can see the wisdom in fake it till you make it. That phrase kind of still grates on me somewhat, but the idea behind it, I think, has a lot of meaning. In terms that don't believe everything that you think. I think back then I really felt that my feelings and my thoughts were very real and solid, and they were indicating something very meaningful. Whereas now I can see that there's so much that just comes through, which is much more beneficial if I can just observe it and let it go. They're just energy blips that I don't have to cling onto and make a big deal out of. And I think the idea of not being at the mercy of my thoughts and feelings as well is very empowering, where previously I got a sense of gratification out of kind of just clinging on to whatever feelings I had and making them very real and solid. But I was quite miserable at the same time. It affirmed a big sense of I, but contentment and happiness wasn't there. And then also this idea of fake it till you make it, or just that the mind is a source of happiness and pain, and that I have a choice about how I feel or respond to things. So even if something's happening that I don't like, I can choose to approach that situation in a way that is beneficial for myself and for others. I don't have to believe what the afflictions are telling me, or to, the thoughts that run through my head. I don't have to seize and grab hold of them and make myself and others miserable. And I think the mind training teachings that we learn here and are so powerful in that any action that we do can be meaningful. That whatever I'm doing is not really what I'm doing that is the most important, but it's the mind that I bring to it. And I think that during those 3 months, there were times where I was doing things I didn't want to do, and I couldn't get my mind to a happy place because I was just rejecting so strongly the external conditions and not paying any attention to my internal conditions that I actually had some control over. And I think the slogans, the gathas that we can learn here, where we can bring the Dharma, bring wisdom and compassion into various actions, can make a lot of the day-to-day activities that we necessarily need to do, like cleaning, washing, going to the toilet, brushing the teeth, washing dishes, all of them can be transformed into something that reminds us of the values that we want to cultivate. And so slowly I've been able to bring that idea of fake it till you make it, or more in the sense of I have the ability to turn the mind. That's really how I see the wisdom of that phrase now. And to cultivate the confidence and the willingness that I can actually work with my mind and not believe the afflictions or the thoughts that arise. And I can steer myself back to wisdom and compassion. And it's not always easy. And so again, the incident that sparked this reflection was because at that moment, I didn't have the tools to work with my mind or with my emotions. And then another person who was sharing that with me didn't find it so helpful. And so I think before, when I've thought, kind of kept coming back to this experience, because this going to Nepal was quite a turning point in my life, I saw the benefit for myself in terms of being able to turn the mind. I benefit from not clinging on to my anger. I benefit from not getting stuck in sadness or attachment and so on. But recently, when this person gave me the feedback, I could see, oh, I want to work with my mind even more powerfully because I don't want others to be negatively impacted by what I put out into the world. And so I could see then the power of compassion and bodhicitta to create an even stronger motivation to work with the mind, to turn the mind. So it was interesting to see it was more powerful than just more than my own benefit. It's because these people that I care about who have been so kind to me, I don't want this internal mess to spill out onto them. Yeah, so maybe fake it till you make it doesn't work for you. It doesn't really work for me as it's phrased, but I encourage you to embrace the idea of turning the mind when these uncomfortable feelings or thoughts arise in our mind, and to be quite fearless about doing that, and to draw on the idea of each moment that we can turn the mind is of great benefit not only to ourselves but to all other beings that we are in close proximity to right now, but also all the beings in the future that we'll come into contact with and that we can benefit.
Could you please give a more detailed description of what embracing your emotions actually means? How does it look like?
I think when I was, you mean in terms of how that can go into a downward spiral, that was the context that I was phrasing it in. So before, when I didn't believe that I could turn the mind, it was like I have strong feelings of anger or attachment or jealousy or something. And I just took hold of them because I thought that they were real and solid and unchanging. And I tried to read into them to find some meaning or some comfort, or I just clung to them very tightly because they were me. Whereas now I can see that just to watch the impermanence, that there's thoughts that arise and they come, they go, and they have a certain energy with them, or strong anger will arise, and then an hour later, what felt so solid and real and important isn't there anymore, or it's in a much reduced place. And that if I can create the inner space to let go, new insight and spaciousness can arise. And I found that, working with in the past week or so, I can feel still, even though I don't try and cling on to the emotions as much as I used to, that when I'm disturbed, I can feel a tightening of my body in my chest, where the I is just really unhappy with what is going on and is wanting to assert itself. And I've been able to work more strongly with just like, I'm bigger than this, and to be able to let go of that energy and physically and mentally relax myself. And then there's space.